Um, for those that don't know me, I did change my name to include my agency at the end, and I'm going to encourage everyone to change that. We're going to do breakout groups later, and I'm going to encourage everyone to change their name to include their full name and their agency, or some way we can identify each other and our roles that we play in terms of how we're going to help really end homelessness. We did a survey, or actually we did a meeting that included a survey conversation about the people who attend this meeting regularly. What do they most benefit from, and what do they most felt like they gained, and what have they lost during COVID? And we were really encouraged to look at ways of networking in this meeting differently. So we're going to try some stuff today to really focus on getting to know each other, getting to know the landscape of shelter and shelter providers specifically, and then doing some networking and breakout sessions to brainstorm. To kick us off though, I thought this might be a good opportunity just to take a few 10 seconds or so of silence or reflection. We've had a lot going on lately, and I feel like with the things happening nationally, and today being the 57th year anniversary of the March on Washington, that they're doing it again today. There's a big event happening in Washington, D.C., and we have Reverend Al Sharpton and Martin Luther King III, who are going to be keynote speakers in that event that's happening in Washington in response to what's happening all over the world, and the most recent with Jacob Blake and stuff happening in Wisconsin. So whatever you think and whatever your thoughts are, I thought I would just start us off with 10 seconds of silence. That could be a prayer for peace, or it could just be a moment to let your head settle. But I'm gonna put on my little timer here and give us 10 seconds of silence to reflect on some peaceful message, either peace for ourselves, peace for the nation, peace for the world, and then we'll get it kicked off. So I'm gonna stop talking for 10 seconds and go. All right, nothing I can do to transition us from silence. I don't have a bell, but if you still need to continue with your silence, you can mute me on or turn off your volume. But I do want to honor the time of the shelter providers and what we came to do today. If you've been here long enough, myself and Louise, geez, I was looking at someone, Louise, and previously Melissa Moss and the city would get together. Typically, it would have been Colin DeForest, who's no longer with the city, and then most recently Tegan or Erica. We typically have a cold weather shelter meeting sometime in August that usually went with the 5 or so of us in the basement of the Market Street building, with the feedback being that there's not a lot of extra money for cold weather, and what are you guys going to do this year to accommodate? I've been on both sides as a shelter provider and outreach provider, and I've seen some amazing things happen when cold weather happened with shelter providers. I've seen us get super scrappy and super diligent. Oh, I don't want to leave out Martha. I'm sorry, Martha, who's not here either. She used to join us too. Out of sight, out of mind. Martha Shepard was our representative for family shelters as well, besides TRM. But we would ask ourselves, what more can we do that we're not doing now that when the cold weather hits? That was the question. And this year we're asking that same question, but we're asking it with the COVID lens. And we're asking it interestingly and differently. So I thought first we would just do a kind of a round table of the shelter providers. Just a quick, who are you as a shelter provider? Where's your location? What population do you serve? I sent a survey to all the providers to give them some ideas, but I'm going to hand it off to Louise from TRM to talk about what the TRM campus does in about 5 minutes, and then we'll go around robin and get everyone, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what cold weather is going to do to our operations. So Louise.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to try to do this real quick. I am located at 425 South Tacoma Way. This is our main campus. We have a men's shelter and a women's shelter now. We serve on a company adults, both males and females. The current capacity, I had to go down from 129 to 90 on the male side. And the original plan for the female side was going to be over 60, but with COVID before we opened, we had to reduce it to 36. Right now, I'm operating at full capacity on both of them. That is the proposed for this winter is to increase with the use of an outside location on the male side, and on the female side, increase but for about 10 beds, not that many because of the COVID restrictions. So that's our 425 South Tacoma Way campus. And then I have a family campus, which is a closed campus, and it's by referral. But I house normally 36 families. Actually, normally we house about 40 because we've been working in overflow the whole year. So there is not a particular plan for winter. We do flex as much as we can and bring in some people on overflow, but due that the fact that it's a closed campus, we will be briefing you as we meet every Friday. We serve meals on both campuses. Uh, Breakfast is 7:30 to 8:15, and dinner is 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. We serve lunch on the weekends from 12:30 to 1:15. And we provide showers, laundry, personal hygiene items, case management, educational, career coaching, uh, addiction recovery, etc. And we also have a outreach team. We got it's divided in two. We got our regular outreach and our search and rescue, and we operate through the winter. And those nights that are very dangerous, we just send them out more often. That's about it.
Awesome. And I think what I would like to, we're not going to have a whole lot of time for questions, at least not until the breakout session. So Louise, if you'd like to drop your email or contact person email in the chat box, so anyone who has additional specific questions to you. Of course, when we do our breakout session, if you end up in Louise's group, feel free to pepper him with hundreds of questions. So to keep us kind of moving along, I'm going to actually have Rob describe something that happened last year that we were very excited about. During our cold weather conversation, we had MDC was working with a group of faith communities to put together cold weather shelter and temporary shelter environments. And the first one that I'm aware of was last year. I think it was Halloween-ish time, right around our cold weather conversation. Bethlehem Baptist came online as an overnight shelter, and MDC took over the operations of that building. So Rob, you want to describe what's happening there?
Sure. So actually it was in late December that we took over managing the Bethlehem Baptist Church shelter. It had been running previously. I think there was a bit of a lull and then restarted right around Christmas actually. And that shelter was, as you mentioned, part of the process to try to find locations around the city to set up additional temporary shelter and increase capacity due to a number of things, including what was going on at People's Park during December of last year. So Bethlehem Baptist Church is at 4818 Portland Avenue. It transitioned along with all the other shelters when COVID hit into a 24/7 operation. At that time, we slightly had to downsize the number of people who were at the shelter. So currently we serve families, single women and couples, up to 40 individuals. And generally we're at capacity at all times. There's a potential, of rotating some people in and out, but it's been relatively static. We don't currently have a wait list. So that's the current situation. When COVID hit, we changed how we run the operation. We spaced everybody out just like all the other shelters, and took measures to try to do health checks with the guests, and to do temperature checks, those kinds of things. And run through some basic COVID and health protocols to keep down the spread of any virus. In terms of the cold weather capacity, so this is kind of quoting Dr. Jackson, who is the pastor there. at Bethlehem Baptist Church, there is capacity, there's space. The challenge is having additional staffing to be able to have more people there. And it's not an unlimited amount of space either. So, I would say there's a potential for some expansion with conversation around that.
Awesome. And I would say the same thing, Rob, for personal questions about the shelter. If you want to drop yourself or whoever is the person who would answer the questions. I know I emailed Dr. Jackson. He said, no, I don't really, I have the building and I do the church stuff, but MDC really runs the operation. So yes, if you can give us a contact person, that would be great as questions come up. And
I will do that.
Cool. Thank you very much.
And just one reminder from the chat, Teresa reminding me, if folks are speaking, please go ahead and turn your video on. It's very helpful for people to be able to see the face of the person presenting. So thank you for that reminder, Teresa.
Awesome. You stole my thunder there when I was about to hand off to somebody who didn't have their camera on. But I know that Dave Shepard is here to represent the Salvation Army. I think he's actually on maternity leave or something, but came in special just for us. So I want to thank you for that, and congratulations to you and your wife. And thanks for turning your camera on, but I'm going to hand off to you, David, to talk about Salvation Army's family shelter. Sorry, we can't hear you very well, David. We can hear there's some muffling, but no words coming through.
Let me see. I tested it and it seems.
Cool. While he's figuring that off, I'm going to hand off. I think Kendra is going to represent what the temporary shelter at Alzheimer's Memorial. Is that correct?
That's correct. And
Awesome.
My apologies, I'm having problems with the camera on this device, which is why it's not on. So I'm not being, defiant. I can't get the camera. It's a problem with something with this phone that I'm on. But yes, I am with the GMAC Family Shelter at Alzheimer Memorial Church. We are one of the newer family shelters, opened in February 27th of this year. We are located at 1121 South Alzheimer Street in downtown Tacoma, and we are relatively small. Our capacity is 8 families. We cater to families with children up to ages 17, and we currently have 6 families right now due to families that have been able to secure their own housing. We don't have a wait list right now. Normally we do, but we actually don't have a wait list right now. So we've got 2 rooms available. We do provide 3 meals a day, every day for the families. We also have laundry, computer access, and we also teach them a finance class so they can learn about how to better handle their money. And I'm trying to think, I was right down with what you were asking. Since we are new, we did open initially as a 12-hour overnight shelter, but of course with COVID, we did have to go 24 hours. And the last word I got from Pastor Dexter Clark is that we will be continuing 24 hours for the foreseeable future. So I believe that was all of the questions that you had sent me. So that was pretty quick, but that's us.
Great, thank you. And then again, if you'll drop your contact info or the person that would be the best contact for the shelter if they have questions in the future, I'd appreciate it.
Will do.
Thank you very much. I don't know if David jumped back on yet.
Hello, I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes, awesome.
Excellent. So I switched to my phone. Something's going on with the laptop. So I am on maternity leave, but I'm taking it intermittently. So I'm still in the office every Monday and on Fridays. And we have a new caseworker here now named Sarah, who's been doing an excellent job. We're really not sure how we want to proceed with our overflow shelter this winter, because with the whole COVID restrictions, it makes it very difficult because we definitely couldn't do the same procedure that we did last time. right now our shelter is at about, we've had to lower capacity as well a little bit. So we're at about, we've gone from housing 75. Now we try to keep it around 55 to 60 to give everybody a little bit more space. But we've changed up a lot of procedures as far as like the meals and stuff. No longer are they congregating all in the same room. Everybody lines up outside, gets their meals, and goes back to their room. So we've had to do a whole lot of changes to keep up. But we're still trying to figure out what it's going to look like this winter, because I know we're definitely going to have the influx of clients. And then, was there any particular questions that we wanted me to go over? I can give my email in the chat box.
But I think that'll work. We just sent out a random set of questions just to do kind of a roundtable the best we could to get a brief introduction for those that are new or are not knowledgeable about the shelters, and knowing that we really only have a handful of shelters that we all know each other, but I don't think everyone else knows. So that was very helpful. And then dropping your email or the person's contact email would be great.
Sure.
And then I'm going to represent two shelters real quick. Fatima Lawrence was the contact for the Catholic Community Services who got back to us about the services that they offer. She wasn't available today. She said she'll come next week and give a little bit more of an overview. So forgive me while I get to my email and read her responses. But the Nativity House shelter is located at 702 South 11th Street in Tacoma. They have been offering 24-hour services since COVID hit, but only for those that are spending the night. They do not offer drop-in services any longer for people who are not spending the night. They offer meals 3 times a day. For those that are not sleeping there, people can come up and get a meal. 8:30 is breakfast, 11 a.m. is lunch during the week, 9:30 on the weekends for breakfast, and 1:30 for lunch. And then dinner is served outside at 5 p.m. for the general population. They serve single adults, 18 and up, no minors at this location. The current capacity is limited due to COVID. The actual capacity right now, is, I just skipped it, sorry there. 58 women and 58 men and 28 women for a total of 86. They have a total capacity at 117, but they're using hotels for vulnerable guests over 60 or with pre-existing conditions. But their capacity total with the hotel and the campus is 117. They don't know if they can expand due to COVID unless they expand hotel operations, which would require additional staff. And they have a name of a person that I'm going for referrals that I'm going to drop in the referral line, whose name is the supervisor, Austin Burton. So let me drop that in. If you don't know, I don't work for Catholic Community Services. I'm literally reading the email from Fatima. She said she'll be here next week, and I'm dropping the information for the phone number for Austin Burton in the chat. But I do run a shelter as well at Comprehensive Life Resources. We run the youth and young adult shelter located at the Beacon Senior Center on the corner of Fawcett and 13th. It's a walk-up shelter. We do 24/7 services for folks that are 18 to 24. We can't have minor children in the building. We don't serve unaccompanied minors or young adults who have children, just singles. We have the capacity with in our COVID world to serve up to 52 with our 6-foot distancing. Typically, we don't hit that 52 number. It's a walk-up shelter, so nobody's turned away for capacity. And we offer all kinds of stuff during the day, 3 meals a day. And we also save meals for people who come late, so it's not a problem if somebody's not here during meal times. We have case management therapists. We have a nurse that comes twice a week. The way that we expand typically, the last couple of winters hasn't been size, although we can go up to about 60 with our space. We typically expand the age. When the Nativity House or Tacoma Rescue Mission hit their max and they have a 25-year-old or a 26-year-old to help alleviate the pressure on the other shelters, we will relinquish our 24-year-old number on a case-by-case basis, mostly to alleviate pressure off the other shelters. And we can be willing to do that. It's not a full everybody come who's 25 or 26, but working with the other shelters, we try to find ways that people can stay indoors when we can. So that's the gist of Beacon. I'll put my information in the chat box for everybody. The other shelter update, I don't know if maybe Megan's going to take this or just me. I didn't see Paula or Mike Boystra jump on, but I don't see everybody. I'm sorry if Paula or Mike is here and they want to just interrupt me. Please do. Oh, Paula, I think I do. Paula Anderson, are you going to talk about the freezing nights and the drop-in center in Puyallup? If you're here. All right, well, I don't know for sure, but I guess the big news is, for those that don't know, most of the time, starting or right around Halloween, November 1st, there's a ministry of churches in Puyallup, Freezing Nights, that puts together a cold weather shelter that moves from location to location. They use volunteers from the church and from the community, and they rely a lot on donations and the support of these different churches. Most years, they're pretty close to covering 7 days a week, but last year there was no Tuesdays, for example, and I think every other Thursday was not. They couldn't find a church site. This year,
James, can you see?
I'll unmute her. Yeah.
Okay,
Great.
thanks.
Great. I'm going to let Paula, I'm not going to steal her thunder. I just set the table for her and for the things that happen in Puyallup.
Okay, great. I don't know if you guys can hear me. I'm using a, there we go. Woo! Okay. I forgot my computer at home, which had all of this on it. So I'm using one we have here that's an older one. So just to let you guys know, there is no freezing nights this year. We have been unable to get enough churches, and that's due to COVID. People are worried. We understand that completely. The churches have literally been doing this ministry for 17 years. So it's been a long time, and we've been so grateful. So right now, as far as any kind of overnight shelter, I know that Mike Boyster couldn't be here this morning. He is working on some things, and that's all I got from him. I don't know what that means. I know in years past, he has tried to talk with the city about warming centers and cooling centers during inclement weather. So I don't know if that's something, but right now, we're just waiting to hear. So in the meantime, what we're trying to do is at New Hope, because of COVID, we're operating a little bit differently as well. We currently serve between 40 and 60 people per day for lunches. And so our facility is small in comparison to some of the other bigger shelters and day shelters. So we are not allowing people inside the building other than to use the restroom one at a time, or to meet with a resource navigator by appointment only. We do feed people every single day. We do hearty lunches that are the equivalent of about 2 meals because they don't have a lot of resources here in this area now. There are some volunteers that are trying to serve dinner meals at night, which I think they've been somewhat successful in doing that, but they're not a sanctioned food meal program, I guess is what I would say. I think the only one that is sanctioned is St. Francis House. They have gone down to 1 night a week, which is Wednesday nights. So quite literally, they don't have an opportunity for breakfast. It could be that our lunches are the only lunch they get, or the meal they get all day, which is why we make them very hearty. Also, we are starting an outreach service. And so we received money from the county, COVID dollars, to create a mobile resources response team. And basically what that includes is an RV and 2 trailers, one with showers and the other one's with laundry services. We will be picking up the RV sometime next week, getting that situated and stocked with 3 laptop computers. It's going to have a couple of hotspots on it so that we can serve people in the best way possible, including video conferencing, either with for coordinated entry or for doctor's appointments and things like that. Our goal is to have an interagency team. We've been contacting some of the PATH teams that we work with and some of the other groups that come out to New Hope regularly and have been doing that for the last 5 years, who are very excited about this. And what that would entail is our goal is to have 3 times out in the community every week, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. We're going to be posted up probably at church parking lots that are big enough to hold all of the equipment that we're going to be bringing. And then we would invite the other service providers to either ride along with us in the RV. We can take up to 5 people, or to bring their own vehicles in and come there and help us serve people. Why I think this is really important is with more and more people becoming homeless, having an opportunity to go to one location and not only get entered into HEMIS, but then also get handed off right there and then to somebody in coordinated entry to get them into the system is going to be a big bonus, I think, for the people that are out on the street. And there are more and more of them out there. I just heard from one of our PATH team people that they went out to Pack Avenue and saw at least 100 people that they did not recognize from the week before. So it's getting real. But being able to provide services, even though it's not overnight shelter, we do intend to have on board the RV, sleeping bags, tents, backpacks, all the toiletries, things of that nature, things that they need when they're out on the street to try and help create their own personal shelter as much as possible. And so we're really excited about that. And as far as New Hope, we may turn it into a bit of a warming center during inclement weather. We will only be able to bring in at max 6 people at a time. So we're going to be looking to our partners in the county to be able to shelter overnight for folks this year.
Great. Thanks, Paula. If you want to, again, drop your email in the chat box so people have questions. Yep. So we've had an opportunity, at least as far as I know, to give a brief introduction to all the shelter providers who are able to confirm. And as you can tell, with 100 beds here and 50 beds here, we end up with some version of around 500 shelter beds throughout the county. There's a few other shelters that we didn't have connections with or that we weren't able to arrange, but we still, even just using the point in time count numbers, which we know are our gross undercount, we don't have the capacity needed to make sure everybody sleeping outdoors can sleep indoors, especially in the winter. So with that said, we would like to take this opportunity to drop into breakout groups to kind of brainstorm that solution. Rob's going to do his best to divvy up some of the, I guess I'll call the core team of the people working on the coalition work right now and making sure to help kind of design the conversation around how do we address the cold weather this year? What can we do? What does the need look like? What are some creative ideas? We know that there's that stuff happening with safe parking, for example, and Maureen gave a brief introduction before the meeting actually started, if you jumped on early, about some of the funding availability for like hotel rooms and other type safety measures that shelters could take if they had resources to add more beds. Last year, like I was saying with Louise and Melissa and Martha at Salvation Army, we made every nook and cranny into a room. And if you guys remember Snowmageddon, February 2019, there were some really intense Fridays where I'm playing taxi with my 4-wheel drive, trying to make sure that the nativity house that was already over 40 beds over, using every office and cafeteria, and Louise using every office. And we were having 27-year-olds sleeping in our room that has gym equipment at the Beacon Center, and all that fun stuff that we did on a Friday night during Snowmageddon to make sure that nobody slept outside, and still people slept outside. We still had a news article from Matt Driscoll of a client who didn't make it inside and passed away. And we just know we can't do that strategy this year. It's not one COVID case in an environment like that, we'll have a whole other kind of problem that'll brew. So with that said, I know that Rob is going to break us up into groups, and this is going to be an exciting, hopeful conversation, not the doom and gloom that I'm making it sound. We're going to say, how do we make sure this doesn't happen? We have 2 months. We got some funders in the room. We got some smart people in the room. We got shelter providers in the room. let's talk it out and let's come up with some solutions and try to figure out what we can propose is going to be different this year so that we don't have to wait until the first snowfall and freak out and turn into taxi drivers and make decisions of, do I add an extra person and violate 6 feet? Or do I let them stay outside? Or this person has cold symptoms. What do I do with that person? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to hand it off to Rob to break this up into groups and start us off.
Yeah, so here's the goal. I'm going to set up 6 rooms and have Zoom automatically split everybody out into those rooms. Please, in the room, have somebody take kind of some general notes, because the idea is that we're going to spend 15 minutes in the breakout room and then come back and do a report out. James, there's a request in the chat. If you could place the questions that we need to consider in the chat box, that way everybody will have access to it. And I'm going to start doing the rooms. So let's see. And there will be a countdown as we get closer to the end to warn everybody when we're about to come out of the breakout room. So let's have a good conversation. All right, so I can't even tell what room we're actually in.
Hi, Larry. Did we get put into a different breakout room?
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
All right. Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute now that everything moved on my screen.
I know there's a little bit of chaos with these, but it's kind of a fun process.
Awesome. Well, hopefully everyone both got to do a little bit of networking and had conversations that just blew our minds about how we're going to solve this. I'm excited to see what people came up with. I'm actually the note taker for group one. So if people don't mind me keep talking, I'll just kick us off with our notes, and then I'll let Rob kind of navigate who's group 2 and 3. A lot of what I'm going to bring up is ideas I'm sure have been bounced around before and have been bounced around other groups, but I'll just kind of read them. So can Pierce County Parks and Rec or Metro Parks participate in a freezing night style shelter expansion, working with other agencies or faith ministries like Vallejo or MDC, CLR, or CCS to do the staffing piece of it? Similarly, the armories of Tacoma and Puyallup. Are we doing everything we can with CARES Act dollars? Do we need a large organization to kind of apply for the work so the smaller organizations can benefit from it and not have to do the fiscal sponsorship kind of stuff? Can high schools play a role? Can the large like mega churches or other churches that aren't open right now that have space, can they play a role? Safe parking. Puyallup apparently is applying for emergency shelter funds, but we didn't know where or how or who. The details weren't clear. Vallejo and YMCA already has a partnership. Can that expand to equal sheltering? Could we look at shelter expansion in the current congregate shelters differently? For example, can they actually add space, add bunk beds, add tents, add shower curtains? Like, could things be rearranged in a way that could add bodies but keep it safe? And then so we're going to end up with just not enough space. So when that happens, how can we look at helping folks who are going to eventually stay outside, stay warm, and stay dry? Tents or congregate tents or military tents or whatever else we can come up with. Cots, I don't know. We didn't get that far. And then final statement by Al, we probably should go to the governing bodies and ask them what they're going to fund, and then we can decide how to do it. That was the final statement. So that's group 1. Rob,
Great. And who's going to speak for group 2?
So everyone else took a step back, so I'm speaking for group 2. We had sort of several categories. One category was indoor solutions, and they included some of the things that James already mentioned, the high school gyms, purchasing a hotel with CARES money, making use of other empty buildings, including working more closely with churches to see if they might be willing to step into this just for the inclement weather piece. And then we talked about some outdoor, also another indoor solution would be more tiny house villages. And then we talked about some outdoor options, which would be having a safe campsite with some sort of warming situation available at the campsite, safe car lots, and possibly during inclement weather, even going into covered car lots temporarily, working out some agreement with that. And see, my notes are really great, James. I don't know how you did that, but then we had another set of things, which was about kind of the infrastructure around helping people get where they need to get. And one of those was doing some kind of educational outreach, some kind of burst of information that gets to the general public about the fact that people who are homeless are not necessarily dealing with COVID, that it's safe to keep helping in one way or another. People don't have to step back from offering shelters just because COVID is here. There are ways to do it safely. And also, you know, even when someone does have COVID, we didn't even get to that part of the conversation. We also talked about the fact that it's hard to know where these empty beds are, that people who are in the system communicate, but it's really hard for people who are just doing referrals to know where to send people. It would be great if someone took ownership of that information in this sense. They own the information and their responsibility is to convey it to the public. That allows the public to know how dire the situation is or how easy the situation is. It allows other people who are doing referrals to give good referrals, and it feels like there's a firewall between the information we need to do our work and the people who contain the information. That was a little bit of a tirade on my part. I added to what the person said. So, sorry if I didn't go in the direction that you were going. Then the only other thing, I'm trying to see if I missed anything else. That somebody called it a shelter availability network. And yes, that ownership of the information. Someone in the city or county actually owning that they need to convey that information to us some way or another. Did I miss anything, folks? Anybody in my group? Unmute yourself and shout out that I missed you.
That was great, Teresa.
Yep, nope, think you got it covered.
All right, thanks.
Perfect. So group 3, who's going to speak for the group 3?
This is Rosemary. I'll speak for group 3. And we spent some time networking about what people are doing, which cut down a bit on our creative ideas time. But in general, we mostly talked about resources available to people that could be expanded, and a couple of policy issues. The resources, a newish resource that Dana spoke about is the Catholic Community Services, the CHIRP program, Homeless Resolution Partnership. And they're looking for some more diversion partners on the east side. So if anybody's interested in that, I can contact Dana. Maybe you could put your name and contact information in the chat. And then we had a representative, Natalie from Apple Health, who also provides some funding for things for back to school and all that people could contact. We had a representative from the landlord liaison who is trying to find landlords who will be willing during this time to make agreements with tenants and to promote the idea of the importance of that and keeping people housed. And we also let's see who it is for the policy issue was around sanitation and the basic need for water and resources, that even though that's something that's happening all the time, that it can only get worse when cold weather is making it even harder. So I think I've left out some things, but it was a good conversation around the opportunities that people in our group present to people who are in need and the desire to work together for more.
Great. Group 4.
I am speaking for group 4. This is Valerie. So we spent a lot of time talking about how hotels are eligible under county funding, but a lot of times they are not utilized. So folks either don't apply for them based on staffing concerns or just really the cost of a hotel. It was recommended that we create almost like a community relationship with hotels so that, for example, I know one agency out in Puyallup is paying a lot less for hotels based on their negotiations than other community members are. And so that was brought up, as well as utilizing community buildings. There's a lot of schools that are empty, gyms that are empty, just a lot of community centers that are empty. So those can all be utilized potentially. You would have to staff them. So that was going to be a barrier to work through. But that was brought up, as well as prevention. If you prevent someone from ever going into the homeless system, you don't have to have a shelter for them to have. So we talked about rapid rehousing. We talked about diversion, which is huge and can be expanded, as well as IPPC. So inside passages, Pierce County. So they're working with folks that are going through the system, but prevent them from actually going through shelter. So That's a big one. And then for PPE, I learned something very new and very cool. So we talked about how there's a variety of grants out there that are available with Tacoma Public Utilities as well as PSE. And so folks who they really want to connect and make sure that everyone has the necessary PPE equipment. And of course, the health department and the Department of Emergency Management has access to PPE as well. So we did cover both of those things. Did I forget anything? Anyone on my team? Nope, shaking heads. Great.
Sounds pretty good.
Mrs. Rosemary, I just had one more thing I really meant to say, and I don't want to leave it out, but Dana was describing how at their day center on South Tacoma Way, that they are trying to provide a school setting for kids who have no place to do their studying if they're homeless. And so that's, while they have to be careful about COVID issues, they're going to be making that available. So that's another resource that we can know about.
Great. How about group 5?
I'll start and then people can chime in. We decided that we should declare a COVID winter response. So especially providers know we're making recommendations for this winter, given the virus, and things can change in the future. This is not a lifetime commitment. That in inclement weather be a seasonal time frame rather than night by night. It's just less stressful on the providers. They can staff up. Identify buildings. Apparently MDC might have one, but certainly other people have identified buildings, and we didn't spend a lot of time on that. Buy a hotel or more, but not on Hosmer because of heavy sex trafficking. So pick the locations with consideration of the environment. And then make sure that there really is enough money for the providers to cover their real expenses. So the executive director is not the last one in the office, transporting somebody to the hotel kind of thing. Just be real honest. And be real honest, we're full, folks. There are 200 people on the waiting list for the Stability Center. Paula identified 100 they haven't seen before. There were 2 empty rooms on the earlier part of today's call. So let's not pretend we have space. So anybody want to add in? Lori said she can't imagine how you all do this. Neither can I. But
Thanks, Maureen. Thanks, Maureen. So group 6, who was taking notes there?
I can speak. I was taking some notes. So we talked a lot about similar things like safe car lots. A couple things came out, especially around data, like forecasting the impact on the unhoused, like thinking about health impacts of lack of shelter as a way, like we all don't want to talk about it, but like the death toll that's coming if we don't have the shelter capacity. So especially funding hotel rooms and even buying a hotel, using school gyms, which we already got support from Tacoma Public Schools on our last petition about this in March. One person raised thinking about if folks are living unsheltered, about getting access to a mailing address, because that's really important getting out of homelessness. One idea was incentive to landlords. Another one was, especially like the reality is we do not have enough shelter now for everyone experiencing homelessness. We have to think about how are we going to care for people that are living unsheltered, advocating for stopping sweeps during this winter, because if sweeps continue, it means like what's going to happen when people park, everything's going to get soaked. It puts people super at risk in the winter when it's rainy and cold for hypothermia and trying to like scramble to find a new safe location. Allocating funding now for like severe weather camping gear. And also because we do have an emergency in Tacoma, like advocating for pausing of permitting and zoning so that we're really able to create shelter and create options. And then also collecting some data on the cost of having folks living unsheltered. So like healthcare system impact, criminal justice impact, to really show the elevation of the cost of this and how it could be reallocated. I'm also gonna, yeah, so.
Great. Any final comments before James wraps it up?
Okay, well, I would say one of the goals will be, like we kind of done before, Garrett was kind of, again, the mastermind behind it, but what the people who shared today, the facilitators or the note takers, will all meet kind of offline, either after this meeting or next week, to take all the notes and kind of formalize our recommendations like we've done before. And this could be an opportunity, as many of us and myself sit on the COC, to have these conversations with the COC, but also to make our request. And I would say something we haven't done in the past that I would like to offer is, there's folks that run really small ministries or programs that are like 1 or 2 staff members, and they're like, man, I would love to apply for this. I don't have time. I don't have the ability. And maybe we can put together a work group that can do the application on behalf of an agency, or be one of our larger agencies can do physical sponsorship. My agency would strangle me if they said, I'm taking on another project right now that isn't already something we're doing. But if I offered my own time to help get that stuff started, and then someone else did the work, the actual physical work, I would absolutely be willing to sponsor and help that way. Or I'm sure we have other folks who would do that as well. So I don't want us to be limited by what we have. I want us to reach out and ask for what we need, and then build from there. Because like Maureen and other people have said, like, we do this every year, and every year there's tears and there's stress and there's anger. And like I've more than once had to have weekend conversations and trips in here. And I said last year, you can look it up, Matt Driscoll wrote a nice article quoting my agency, which resulted in me violating confidentiality and going in a hearing to state why I violated confidentiality. But I was so mad that I couldn't come up with a better response, and emotional, and I responded that way, and I took the brunt of that information and that situation. But I don't feel like we have to do this every year and make it up every single year. It would be nice if we could, yes, this year we'll do it for COVID, but let's make a plan that we can sustain. So all of that to say, I'm very excited that we did have at least both of our kind of largest community funders, the city and the county, or at least the largest municipalities, here today to participate in that exercise, and to take that information back. At least maybe can help us lead us in the right directions if we're not, if the option wasn't presented that was directly what was considered. But if there's an agency or a city that's like, hey, we want to do something, maybe we can be pointed in that direction. So with that said, thank you all for that exercise. I see that we have a lot of county staff here, so I'm going to hand off to the county for updates. And I know one of the updates I've requested, and I asked it of Manu, who's out sick, but the care center, the community care center, or the temporary care site, has changed management, and any update on that would be helpful, as well as whatever updates you have. So I don't know who I'm handing off to, but Val, Heather, John, take it away.
I'm going to take the starting spot here. So hi, everybody. My name is Heather Moss. I'm the Director of Human Services for Pierce County. I see a lot of familiar faces and familiar names. So it's good to see you all again, and a lot of new partners, at least to me. So it's nice to meet you two-dimensionally, at least for now, and hope you are all doing well in our COVID and other crazy world activities right now. So I understand that last week you had some questions for staff from Human Services about the emergency shelter grant that we've been working on in partnership with a few other jurisdictions. I'm going to get to that, but I thought I'd just take a minute to talk to you more generally about some of the activities that we've been working on that the staff have been so busy with around COVID response. So as I've come to talk to this group a few months ago, gosh, I can't believe we're talking about months now, about the CARES Act. The county received a $158 million in CARES funding. You heard from Maureen earlier in this conversation that Pierce County is one of 5 jurisdictions in the state that received dollars directly from the federal government. So that's the bucket to which I'm referring. Early on, the executive worked with the council to figure out how to start dividing out those dollars. And they made them into they put the dollars into very big, broad categories, one of which is titled Community Response and Resiliency. And that really was meant to cover all of the services that you would think of in a social service response to a pandemic like we are in now. So so the Human Services Department and our partners have really been responsible for figuring out how best to distribute those dollars, what to spend those dollars on to be responsive to our COVID issues. And of that $158 million, approximately 25 million of it has been allocated to this community response and resiliency. I'm pretty proud of the work that we've done on our website to share where those dollars are going. So if you have questions about how those dollars are being allocated, you can look on the Human Services Department website, or you can look at Open Pierce County, and there's a lot of great detail about how that community response and resiliency bucket is being allocated and spent along with the rest of the $158 million. But just briefly, what we've been focused on right now is what you would expect: supporting emergency shelter, funding expansion of shelters where we can. We have a lot of money going into nutrition supports, whether that's food bank support or actual home delivered meals to seniors who are unable to leave their homes. We are funding domestic violence services capacity expansion, as well as behavioral health expansion. We also have special programs set up for our veterans to make sure that they receive services that they need in this time. And then one of our biggest programs right now and our biggest pushes is around rental and mortgage assistance. So when Valerie spoke earlier about prevention, I, like many of you, I'm not sleeping well at night when I think about the long-term economic toll that that COVID is having on our community. And I know that it's pushing a lot of people who are already vulnerable onto more of a brink of being homeless. And we want to do everything we can to prevent that. So we have put over $4 million of CARES Act into rental assistance. But as you all have likely heard, we have another $10.7 million coming from the state to supplement that. So we are working fast and furious on getting rental assistance out the door to prevent people from adding to our homeless rolls. It's dismaying to hear that our homeless population is growing, but we are hoping to prevent that or mitigate that as much as possible. So I just wanted to give you that update and encourage you to seek more information. If you have questions specifically about CARES Act, please reach out to me or any of the staff at the Human Services Department. We'll be happy to share information for you. Or if you're able, go on to our website and check out the Human Services Department website or the Open Pierce County website. So that's a little plug for CARES. Again, one more thing I want to say before I get to the 4.7 is that you also have been, you probably hear that there are other dollars coming to the county, so particularly to human services. So we have, during the normal course of a year, we have grants that come to us from the federal government and from the state government. Many of those are non-COVID related, but obviously we're thinking about them now in terms of our COVID response. But then we also have a lot of new dollars that are coming to us that are COVID specific. At this point, we are in triage mode, frankly, and we're doing our best work right now to focus on the CARES dollars, since those have an expiration date of that on December 30th. So we need to get those dollars out, allocated, and used appropriately and spent and invoiced all by December 30th. So for any of the grants that we're receiving right now that have a little bit longer timeline into 2021, we're holding off, frankly, on making decisions on how to allocate those. So the conversation we just had is super helpful for us to be thinking about long-term, where are the needs and where can we start focusing some of those dollars that are coming after the CARES Act dollars expire. So to turn to the emergency shelter grant, I understand that Jeff gave you a brief presentation about that, and I think he is on this call. I know John is, and I see Valerie here too, and a couple of other of our staff. So I'll give you the overview, but if you start asking too many details, I might have to rely on staff who are more steeped in this than I am. But what we're doing right now is working on a grant we just submitted a couple days ago to the State Department of Commerce. They issued an RFP across the state to all counties and local jurisdictions saying, we've got some money for you for emergency shelter expansion. There are a couple of conditions. One of them is you can have this much money if you apply independently, Or you can have 20% more if you work with your partners in your county to come together with a joint response. The other condition they have is that these shelter beds have to be up and running by end of December. So once again, we're a little bit under the gun here to try to get something in place. So back to that first condition, what we've been working on the last few weeks is meeting on a pretty regular basis, I think weekly, and by me, I mean Valerie and Jeff, meeting with our colleagues at the City of Tacoma, City of Lakewood, Puyallup, and University Place to first come together and say, is there some kind of nexus of common goals that we have where we can all agree to come together and pool our money and take advantage of commerce, the state's offer to give us more money if we all come together under a joint application. For any of you who live in those communities or have worked with all of us in government in these different entities, that's no small task. And so I guess I just want to reinforce or clarify for you that that act of coming together and working hard to find common ground among all those jurisdictions has been pretty challenging, but also very rewarding. And I'm really proud to say that we've come up with an application that all 5 of those jurisdictions have signed off on, that we've submitted to Commerce. We're very confident that we will get our full funding, which is that $4.7 million, to fund shelter expansion here in Pierce County. The offer on the table from the Commerce is that those dollars can be used partly for capital expenditure and acquisition, and then can be used to some extent over the next, I think 3 years it is, to pay for operations. So the good news about this is that it comes with a little bit of at least a short-term window of revenue to pay for that expansion activity. What we submitted, though, was not much more than an agreement that these 5 entities are coming together, and we have sort of an aspirational proposal that we shared with Commerce that we would expand by 116 beds our shelter capacity in Pierce County over the next 3 months. We don't have a lot of details yet on locations. There are a couple of projects that are further down the road that we slated as potential sources to receive these dollars. But that's where, once we get approval back from Commerce, is where we start having conversations at the county level and at the local community level about where those specific shelter beds should be located and what they look like. So all that to say, I want to reassure you, I guess, that we are not trying to get ahead of any community process. What we're trying to do is get all of our government partners aligned to a point where we can put in this application, and now the work begins to bring in our community partners and talk about where those actual beds go and identify partners to provide operation support for that aspiration. So I think that's all I had to share with you. Oh, I do want to say one other thing. Just to give you an update on going back to rental assistance, we now have, as of yesterday, 2,900 applications in our queue that we are working through with our providers to get rental assistance. So I just wanted to share that with you too. So that's what I've got for you. And like I said, I'm available for the rest of the hour if we want to talk more, if you have questions for me, and if you have really detailed questions, I'm going to hand it off to John and his team.
I do think we have a few minutes for questions. Maybe the easiest way might be to put it in the chat box if you're able to. If you're on a phone and you can't, you're just going to have to kind of interrupt us with your question. But I think we have, 10-ish minutes or so for the county updates left. Yep. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop in the chat box or interrupt the.
I answered all your questions. That's awesome.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I would say, for the sake of timing, you don't have to put them in the chat box. Let's just go ahead and bring them up.
Sherry from Vallejo asked if the shelter bed expansion over the next 3 months is to add 113 beds. 116, I think, is what we ended up within the contract or in the proposal, and that was just penciling out estimates about acquisition versus how much it would cost to operate over the course of the next 3 years.
Heather, I think this kind of overview that you just presented is really helpful to everybody. And I think it's a question of timing, that it would have been wonderful if this could have been a little earlier, even if you didn't have a full application ready to go in, or just so that people were aware of what the Human Services is engaged in, and various timelines. And as those other monies come online, the CDBG and ESG CV monies, they come with waivers on public process. So it's going to be even more important that people understand the potential use of the availability of the money, where and how to be engaged. Anyway, thanks for coming today.
That's a fair point, and we will do our best to get the word out and share as we learn about what the dollar amounts are and what the timelines are and what our suggested process is around that. Just not to justify, but I just want to remind you all too that the team that the county has working on homeless issues is about 10 people strong, and they are rightly so very preoccupied right now with getting those CARES dollars out. That is a huge lift for us. That $25 million that I shared with you earlier is almost 30% increase over our regular budget. So we don't have any new staff working on this. People are just working double time to get these dollars out. So I totally agree with you, and we are going to do our level best to keep you engaged and to share with you as we learn what we learn, and to have you help us through making those decisions. So I appreciate the suggestion, Maureen. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Jeff Latham. I work with IPPC, Inside Passages. I have two questions or concerns. One is, when the rental moratorium's over and the people I work with have to come up with funds, are we being proactive and looking at that when it happens? And two, are some of these funds you're talking about, are they available to nonprofit church organizations?
Okay, so rental moratorium, yes, that is a terrifying deadline that's looming large for all of us. October 15th or 16th, I think it is. It might be that the governor extends that, but frankly, extending it is sort of a curse and a blessing, right? Because it relieves pressure from people, but it also makes them less worried about trying to make up that rental gap that they're missing. So as I mentioned at the end of my last remarks, we already have 2,900 people applying for rental assistance. Through our CARES dollars and the Commerce dollars, we're able to pay for up to 3 months of rent for eligible applicants. Eligible meaning they had to have a job loss related to COVID, or a wage loss, income loss related to COVID, and they have to be at or below either 50% or 80% of AMI, depending on sort of which funding source we use. But you're right, the rent moratorium, the eviction moratorium, more explicitly, is kind of a scary place to be. And so we're hoping that the rental assistance kicks in for the people who are really at risk of being evicted. The other thing I can share is that I know that Pierce County Superior Court is one of a few counties in the state that's working on a pilot program to provide mediation and legal intervention for tenants who are at risk of being evicted. It's in early stages. I believe that program is set to launch mid-September, which is a month before the moratorium ends. And we are partnering with them to make sure that we are prioritizing rental assistance for tenants who are in that program as well. So that's what we've got going on at the county level. Those state dollars to fund our rental assistance program is the state response to rental assistance. So people need to know that if they need help with paying their rent, they need to contact us, or to Maureen's point, there are a few smaller jurisdictions that are using some of their indirect CARES dollars or other revenue to provide rental assistance. Regarding your question about funds available to churches, I don't know that we have any funds that are directly funding church efforts, other than we do have dollars that are funding a lot of the nutrition supports that churches are running, or if they are operating shelter beds indirectly through other shelters that we've been funding. So I think that's the best answer that I've got for you around CARES dollars being available to our church community.
Are we just supposed to jump in because I have a question? I'm going to jump in. In terms of the way the money will be used, how much of it is marked for publicly owned housing so that we don't just look at 3 years, we're actually looking at a longer term? Are you earmarking any that's specifically for publicly owned housing?
Do you mean that 4.7 or the CARES dollars?
Any of it, anywhere.
So part of the rental assistance program is paying for rent of people who live in private housing, theoretically, right? But we also have funding allocated, I don't recall the number, it's like 1.5 million maybe, John, for affordable housing, in that we are going to have an application process for people who operate affordable housing, housing that's below market rent, to get compensated for loss of revenue in their operations. So that's what we're doing in the CARES dollars. On the emergency shelter grant from the State Department of Commerce, I think what the focus in on that contract or that grant specifically is emergency shelter and shelter beds only. So I don't know that there's an anticipation that that can be used. The last thing I'll offer, Teresa, is that we've heard loud and clear from a lot of our stakeholders that we should be considering buying a hotel with CARES dollars. I alone do not have control over those dollars. There are a lot of decision makers in the mix that decide how we spend those dollars. And so we've been thinking about it, and we've been looking at options to do that. It's easier said than done, frankly. But if that were to come to play, the ideal goal would be using something like a hotel as short-term, non-congregate shelter, and then eventually turning that into affordable housing, supportive housing of some kind. So that's absolutely under consideration. Oh, and I wanted to say, Teresa, one last thing, since you mentioned it earlier, you talked about that empty bed status in the shelters. I know that that's something that Garrett had been working on a while ago. I'm super interested in us being able to pick up that work and create some kind of online resource that everybody can go to look at on a daily basis about what the shelter capacity is. So it's on our list to do, and we're going to get to it.
And we appreciate the work you've done to get stuff out online as a county. I mean, there's a lot of useful information that you put out there. I really want to say publicly owned housing is something that we let go of a long time ago because there were some problems around it. Single occupancy rooms, SROs are another thing that have been let go. Those are two things that if we had maintained, we would not be in the fix we are in. We'd be in a fix, but we would not be in the difficult fix we are now. And anything that happens now that's going to last us for 3 years, we are just kicking the can down the road. So please, please, if there's any way to make some of those funds go into permanent, affordable, publicly owned housing, that is a long-term solution that we need desperately. So I'm just saying, everything else is short-term. You're 65, it all looks like short-term unless it's publicly owned housing.
Well, I mean, yes, I agree with you, and I'd one-up you in the sense that really private home ownership is the ultimate holy grail, right? So, even one more step further down the continuum is helping people get into that home ownership state. So, yeah, I agree with you that we have serious gaps to fill all along the continuum of housing.
Can I jump in on what Heather mentioned about the eviction moratorium? We do think it's going to end on the 15th. In a way, I agree. I kind of hope it does, but this period of time in between, when we really have an opportunity to do something, people are not coming forward. They're not trying to get payment plans. And I want to let everybody know that Tacoma Pro Bono's Housing Justice Project has a partnership with the Center for Dialogue and Resolution and Fair Housing. We are prepared right now to provide free mediation. If people contact us, the Housing Justice Project at Tacoma Pro Bono, we can facilitate that now before the state's program gets started. They're expecting it'll probably start, if they're lucky, by October 1st, and we'll be folded into that. But Pierce County is lucky because we've received some funding to start that now. So people can contact us. I put the email in the chat. Thank you.
Heather, I'm wondering in regard to having real-time access to what beds are available in the community. What are the pros and cons of housing that at 211 rather than creating another information resource? I have mixed feelings about 211, but how do you see it?
Yeah, we haven't really thought through a lot of the details yet, just that a validation that something like that is needed, that we need real-time data on capacity of our shelters and then what their current census might be. Where it's housed is immaterial, but I do believe, to Teresa's point earlier, that the county or some other public entity has a role there in being able to span across all of the different shelters. And frankly, we have a little bit of power in the sense that we fund a lot of the shelters and can make it a condition of funding. Just a little preview for some of you. But Al, I think, I don't know that it really matters where it sits as long as it's easily accessible to people who are making referrals. 211 is a potential option for sure.
I think this might be a good time to drop contact info in the chat box too for extra questions. And it sounds like there's a lot of interest to have you guys back. I know that Val and Jeff attend regularly. So I think we'll have more opportunities going forward to make sure that the county is steadily on the agenda to address questions as they come up each week. But I'm going to say thank you so much for those updates. I'm sure people might have more questions. If you or whoever you'd like to be the contact person, just drop the email in there. I'm sure everyone knows how to get a hold of all of you, but just in case, I think that's great. Thank you so much.
Yep, I put my name and email in there if you need to reach out to me, but hopefully you know a lot of my colleagues at the Human Services Department well, who can likely answer your questions better than I. So we're happy to be available as needed.
Great, thank you so much. And I know the next updates for the City of Tacoma, I see there is a person named City of Tacoma, and I'm wondering if that person's giving us any updates. I didn't have anybody respond back to me from the city saying that there was any specific updates, but I wanted to offer if Erica or somebody.
Hi, I just jumped on. I don't know who the City of Tacoma person is. Oh. I'm curious to know who this is too. I do have an update, so I'm sorry, I just jumped on late, so I'm a little ill-prepared. So give me a second to find the update that I had for you guys. And I know that Allison provided the update yesterday during the shelter call. I feel like I've been trying to do 20 things at once, so I'm sorry. Okay, there it is. So I just wanted to remind all of our currently funded providers that we do have a funding opportunity for some digital infrastructure. So people who do currently have a contract with the City of Tacoma, we are providing some funds out for digital infrastructure, especially in response to the pandemic. We do know that a lot of our operators have had to modify their programming and address how they want to respond. So I just wanted to remind everyone that's out there, if you do have any questions, please reach out to me. You should have gotten some communication about that. And that's all I have.
Awesome, thanks. I think the only other governmental update we usually have is the health department. Manu does that normally. He's out sick. He told me that I tasked him with giving me the new information about the care center or trying to connect me with somebody from the new operator. But maybe that'll be next week, but maybe Val just unmuted herself to jump in. I don't know if that's the case, but maybe.
So we know the new care center is going to be through MultiCare, and John and I are working on getting you a contact. We've asked that they come to the coalition and do a presentation, as well as we've also asked them to come to the 3 o'clock shelter calls so that everyone has the exact same information. So as soon as we get that contact, they just took over on Monday. So I'm pretty sure they're going through their own little growing pains at the moment. But as soon as we get that contact, we'll get them scheduled and we'll reach out.
Awesome, thanks. I know that I heard plenty of concerns about the previous process, and I'm excited that we have a new operator, and we'll see if the concerns are alleviated with new operator. I I don't know if anyone else from the health department, I saw Carrie's name, but if there's any other health department updates, I'll give a couple of seconds for someone to jump in. All right, well, interrupt me if you choose to. Rob, you're gonna have to remind me if you have anything else on the agenda.
We do. We have Maureen's advocacy update.
You've got safe parking also. Do you want to do that first or?
Well, so what I would say about safe parking is that the group continues meeting. I don't see Janet or Colin on the call. So I don't think there's a whole lot new to report there right at this moment, unless Megan thinks that there's something more to say about safe parking.
There's not much to report on. We're working on the applications for for sites to apply, as well as the agreements on safe park lots for guests that are coming on. I know there'll be more updates later next week as we're getting more word. There's a meeting on Monday at 11 a.m. that we've set. If you would like the Zoom link and invitation, feel free to email me if you'd like to be added to the Google group for specific updates. I'll drop my email in the chat.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have the floor, Maureen.
I have the floor. Okay, thank you. If you're on the listserv, you received way too many emails earlier this morning that were pretty much eviction prevention focused, tenant focused. For those of you who are working that end as well, and what we're starting to see come out, University of Washington's got a brand new study out, highest risk neighborhoods, urban institutes out. Most of these are really easy to use. You can drill down to the local continuum of care. You can, zip codes or census blocks that are covered. You can do it by county. You can do it by neighborhood. So we can get a real sense of high risk, and hopefully down the road, we can, hopefully the county will have the ability to sort of match where the rental assistance money is going out against these highest risk areas of our community. I know everybody's tracking race, but we also have the ability to track class, basically income, by these other databases, opportunities, and probably to ask questions that I haven't thought about yet, but will, that might be helpful as we encourage decisions on how money should be spent. Okay, so I didn't do a one-pager because I ran out of bandwidth, but three things that are sort of the top of the pile. One is, in the past, the coalition has had candidate forums during election years, and they've really been pretty amazing, especially after Al gave us that new format to use. So Cynthia Stewart, who's a member, regular participant in the coalition, is not able to be here this morning, and she asked if I would pass on to everybody that she's more than willing to help if the coalition wants to host candidate forums. She's not going to do them. What she does traditionally is to really help whomever wants to do it. It's a great way to sort of get your feet wet without having to recreate everything. Cynthia's got all the information, contact information, procedural information, and the league does candidate forums all the time and has them scheduled this fall. But so two questions. One is, do we want, as a coalition, try to have candidate forums this fall? Because if we do, we've got to decide like now, because candidates' schedules are filling up. So that's one thing. And if we want to, who would like to lead it? Doesn't have to be one person, but it needs to be a couple people. Could be a couple, could be a group. And if so, Cynthia will help whomever wants to do this. And if not, if we decide we're going to take a bye this year just because of everything else, then there are other opportunities. The League is partnering with the Tacoma Pierce County Affordable Housing Consortium. They have 3 county level candidate forums scheduled in September and October. And while the questions are heavily housing and they lean heavily on what's called the Burke report, which is really about trying to get private investors, private developers developing housing, there are some questions about homelessness. So that's an avenue. People could join those. There will doubtless be other candidate forums, other candidate conversations. So it's kind of like, I don't know if people want to put something in the chat, and there is a working group that meets after this meeting, and maybe that group can take it up, but that's something that is a priority. Second thing is, and we've gone over most of this right now, and this is the whole eviction defenses. How do we keep as many people housed as possible? October 15th is the deadline for the eviction moratorium. It'll be 14 days before those unlawful detainers begin to hit the courts. And the eviction court pilot, the early resolution process that Heather and Lori talked about, that I was calling mandated mediation. This other title's much nicer. Michael Mira is a member, the executive director of Tacoma Housing Authority is a member of that working group. And so if they are ready to go by mid-September, that would be great. But it assumes 2 things. One, well, assumes the courts approve, but then it also assumes that there are enough lawyers so that every tenant has a lawyer. And it also assumes that every tenant who goes to mediation goes with rent assistance in hand. And so that affects the system by which people apply, are deemed eligible, and what they receive by way of rental assistance. So that's what makes the mediation work, that the tenants got rent assistance to bring to the table. And I would argue that the county, out of the goodness of their hearts, and because they're handling the bulk of the rental assistance, if they could also make available at least the contact person and the amount of money that's available for these individual jurisdictions that have decided to do their own rental assistance. And just as a sticky note, we should invite Tacoma Community House. They've got the rent assistance for youth coming out of the Office of Homeless Youth at Commerce. That's the same general pot of money as the 10.7 million that's coming, the ERAP money, but the Office of Homeless Youth Services has allocated their money separately, and of course has separate eligibility. I did spend a few minutes trying to figure out how many months of rental assistance I could get if I fell like a Venn diagram and you fall into all of the proper eligibilities. And actually I did pretty well if I were a youth under 50%. So, and a veteran maybe too. So that, the third thing is the question that's been on the table many times, and it really ties in, I think, to our earlier discussion, which I thought worked really well around the shelters reporting and the winter shelters and the breakout rooms and all that sort of stuff. I thought accomplished a lot of things, and I learned a huge amount. So should we, as a coalition, adopt certain policy positions? I'm not talking about an individual program or an individual agency, but should we develop certain policy positions that we would agree to, sort of like principles? We kind of have the principle of who we are, the open table, everybody welcome, you know, that sort of thing. But should we go beyond that and in a more organized fashion? We've done this on some individual things, sort of a sense of the whomever is on the meeting. But should we go forward with that? And if so, how would we do it? And if I'm not looking for answers today, I'm looking just to plant the question. If you have immediate thoughts, put them in the chat if you would. And but it's something I think we need to pick up, because like Heather said this morning, how much she heard from us. Is that how we want to communicate, or do we want other differently organized as not replacing but as options sort of things? So some of our friends at a national level have put out frameworks for that are basically principles for the use of money, the equitable framework for the use of not just the CARES Relief Fund, but also the coming ESG-CV, the CDBG CV, the FEMA money that's already out there. So just those are the top of my piles at the moment. There are a huge number of what to look to be really good opportunities around preventing homelessness, around responding to homelessness, that are coming out by webinar, by article, all kinds of ways. In a perfect world, you'd get one email that has the links to all of those. It's an imperfect world for right now. And if you haven't registered for the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance annual conference on homelessness, that registration is still open. It's all by Zoom, and you get the 1 day of Housing Washington free. So it's a good year to do that. So you know how to find me. So thank you. And as always, thanks for letting me do this.
Awesome.
Thank you, Maureen.
I was going to say, so one of the requests that we kind of had, again, from our kind of research or informal survey, was that we had some networking time. So we are going to do kind of a quick highlight of one person who has an announcement, and then offer kind of a good of the order space. But Julian Wheeler asked to give an announcement that he put in the chat box, but if you missed it, this is your opportunity, Julian, to share.
Oh, thank you, James. I'll just say it's in the chat box, but it's good to see Heather Moss on the call, and Valerie. The ACAC stands for Accessible Community Advisory Committee, and I volunteer as a chair of the Pierce County ACAC. Our next meeting is online. It's Tuesday, September 8th at 9 o'clock. My email address is in the chat box as well. We aid in expediting funds for accessibility projects, and mandated by the state law, the Accessible Communities Act of 2010. We welcome new members, new ideas, and speakers for our next regular sessions coming up in odd-numbered months. But we certainly invite people to consider, having us work together, since we can possibly find a way to fund something in your scope of work. Anyone on this call, if it can be characterized as an accessibility project. Thank you very much.
Awesome. And now we're done with the actual agenda, but leaving space for good of the order or networking times or introduction times. I don't know how we do it exactly in the real world. We kind of just linger, but I'm going to let Rob offer a chance to anyone needs to go to the order, or if Rob had anything else to wrap up. Otherwise, that's all I have. And I see Al. So
yeah,
Al.
Three things. I always start with three things. Two of which are just sort of general information. First of all, the City Planning Commission and the Human Rights Commission have agreed that we are going to do some sort of a collaboration to try to improve equity in the distribution of housing in the community. And that effort has been on hold because of the virus, but I got a message yesterday that will be starting up. And our focus on the Human Rights Commission will probably be in the area of trying to get some changes in planning and zoning rules to allow more density and create more spaces that might be affordable to people. The second thing is that I've talked before about the pending collaboration between the Homeless Coalition and the Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber of Commerce committee chair has gotten the approval of Tom Pearson and the Chamber board president for that collaboration, and it will go before their board meeting shortly. So that collaboration will be beginning to develop. It was interesting that Ben Ferguson, who's the chair of that group, said that he was going to ask Sherry at Vallejo to head their portion of the discussion over workforce development. I don't know if you know that yet, Sherry, but I was going to nominate you to do it on our side. So I think you're going to be a fairly important bridge in that thing.
Yeah, I'm super excited, Al, and I want to meet with you too to chat about the conversation that's gone on up to this point and see how I could do my best to represent the coalition on the board.
I don't think there's much conflict of interest in this situation. We really are all very much on the same wavelength as far as I can tell. One of the things that Garrett was able to do with Zoom was to create a poll capability. Remember, we asked how many people were in favor of this chamber collaboration. And I don't know how to create a poll, but it seems to me that's a very easy device for figuring out how many of our folks on this side are in favor of or opposed to some policy issue or question and that kind of thing. So polling seems to me a fairly simplified answer if we can figure out how to do it on Zoom.
Yeah. So if we have items we want to poll, that's something that we can set up ahead of time and we can do it again.
Last thing is back to this issue of freezing nights for a minute. In our breakout group, I said that I think it's really important that we begin to ask the governing bodies of the various organizations that might have space that could be used if they would be willing to allow it to be used. Now, governing bodies here are like boards of directors of organizations or school boards or church governing boards or landlords, big big places like the building above the county city building. But I think we need to be asking those folks rather than just asking among ourselves. They need to be asked so that they get a chance to decide whether they want to assist or they want to turn us down. So I would encourage that we try to do that kind of thing. That's enough for me. Thank you, folks.
I got one thing. Well, Garrett and I and Erica Bartlett with Tacoma Tenants Organizing Committee have been working to create a draft this week to produce a letter campaign. So emailing officials about trying to stop the cuts for the civil rights investigator positions. Just be looking out for that to sign and share with your networks if you're interested. My hope is to drop it on Monday, but it might be Tuesday. Yeah, the more emails, the better. And yeah, I agree with Al and all of this that he just said. Yeah.
So I didn't see anybody about candidate forums. Maybe I missed somebody in the chat said they'd like to take it on.
If you did miss anything, I'm going to be saving the chat so we can kind of take a look back at, make sure we capture all the information from today. So I didn't see it pop up.
A couple of us had a private conversation about it and decided to take it to the planning group after this meeting.
Great.
Great, like networking in the time of COVID, a little more awkward than it is in real life. So that's fun. I encourage those that have updates for the good of the order to share. Those that have come to the end of the meeting, we're going to hang tight for a group of us after the meeting. But so you're welcome to stay and learn how the sausage is made. But otherwise, appreciate everybody. Oh, sorry, whoever was going to jump in.
This is Rosemary, and I was just going to ask Teresa to encourage people to participate in some of her merrymaking projects So maybe you could do that just briefly.
Okay, so just to let people know, we are still creating those packets for people who are newly housed. So if you have somebody, we can't outfit a whole apartment or anything, but we gather things like we have some air mats and we have some kitchen utensils and we have some sheets and towels and things like that. So let us know. They're kind of starter kits and we give people what we have. So sometimes we have a whole bunch of stuff and sometimes all we can give them is an air mattress and a pot with a lid, but at least we have something to offer. Also, we are still doing the creativity kits. So those are, right now, it's limited to these card making kits that are free to people. You just have to let us know you need them. There's enough in there to make like 10 cards, and they're something to do when someone's trapped in a space and they have a little creative juice. We are going to start gearing up in October for the 99 stocking, which I don't know if it's going to become 250 bags or what it's going to become given what's happening right now, but we will be doing something there. And so think about us when you come across things like you find 100 combs, or you find, you see a sale for 50 chocolate Santas, not yet, but in November. Anyway, think about us and know that I will be calling on you to see if you're willing to help, and also to let us know where to distribute some of those that are no longer going to be able to be distributed at, there'll be a smaller number at some of the places we've done it for before. Anyway, call on me also if you have some creative idea. And I have so many people giving us donations. I would love to find a better way to distribute them, and I have a few ideas. So I'd love to hear from people who are interested in engaging in that kind of redistribution of good things that fall on our heads. That's kind of it.
Awesome. And in case you didn't see it in the chat, Kenny Coble actually offered an update and a reminder. Community forum at the Tacoma City Council is going to be on September 15th this next month, as opposed to the second Tuesday that it usually is. So thanks for letting us know that, Kenny.
Teresa, this is Carolyn. We had that issue with the furniture being available and not having a place to put it, and we found out that there's a Northwest Furniture Bank available in Tacoma for furnishing people with apartments.
Right, and that is actually, if people don't know about that program, it's a great program. It was shut down for a little while when COVID first hit, but the thing with that is it's a one-time option for people who can go in, and if somebody is more familiar with this than I am, please jump in and correct me, but we are a referral agency for them, so people can go one time in their life, and there's a fee, which sometimes agencies will cover for people to help them get their furniture, but they can come in and take, there's a certain amount they can get depending on how many members are in the family. That's a much more formal thing where it's like for your whole household, and there are some requirements around it that a lot of people who are just coming from a tent to an apartment, that's not going to work for them. But it works great for people who are going into, like, they have a whole family and they want to use their once in a lifetime shot for that furniture. So these are really two separate issues, and I hope that makes sense. Anyone want to add anything about the Northwest Furniture Bank?
Yes.
I have multiple clients that have used it multiple times, so it's not just once in a lifetime.
So, yeah, I'll
really?
jump in.
They changed
with
that?
Northwest Furniture Bank. Well, you can get a waiver, so it depends on the circumstances. Why typically their rule is one time, and it's encouraged to be one time because of their entire availability is based off donations, right? So, but they do have a waiver process to allow folks to use it more than one time, and they can take whatever is on the referral form. So if a client says they need a TV stand, dishes, a TV, if that material is available, they can actually take all of those things. The big kicker is there are two things. One, you either have to pay for delivery, which is like $25 or $50, but you cannot miss the appointment. And that's where some folks have a barrier. So when I was at my former nonprofit, we would drive clients directly there, and that way they didn't miss that appointment. But it's just a real big communication thing. But you can get tables, chairs, beds, mattresses. They actually take donated mattresses and rebuild them so that they are completely cleaned out, like no risk of bed bugs. It's a very phenomenal system. And I encourage anyone who isn't eligible to refer folks to Northwest Furniture Bank to contact them. It's a 30-minute training, and then you can actually be a referral to Northwest Furniture Bank for your own clients or for folks in the community that you work with.
Yeah, I wish we'd get the word out. It'd be nice to get the word out for people to know that they can donate there too, because I had a bunch of furniture I would have loved to have given them.
Yeah.
This is Sheila. I want to jump on with what Valerie said. The cost can be frightening. I hate to say this. It's $225 for Northwest Furniture Bank to deliver, and it's $125 if you provide your own vehicle that has to be covered. There are some caveats. So just want to make sure that people are aware going in that there is a cost. And then like Teresa said, sometimes the agencies will pick up the cost of the pickup and delivery. Thank you.
But there's one thing at Northwest Furniture Bank, there's a little difference now that the virus is here. You can no longer go in and pick your furniture out. I can turn in a referral and they'll pick your furniture out for you. And if you pick it up, then they'll set it out and bring it to you. But you're no longer able to go in and roam around. And that changed since they opened back up.
Thanks for adding that, Jeffrey. That's great to know too.
So what would be the most efficient real-time way of making information like this conversation that just happened, that took like 4 people having a piece of the information available to people, providers who need it? I don't know the answer. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could have like a Facebook page for people that need resources and they can just get it. I don't know. I think that's a good point.
So most providers are actually already referral mechanisms to Northwest Furniture Bank. It's pretty uncommon for a homeless service provider not to have a direct link. Maybe a new case manager hasn't had that part of their onboarding yet, but most providers in Pierce County are actually direct referral sources to Northwest Furniture Bank already. I think we need to share it more broadly than the, I constantly watch the chat box and it takes my distraction. So I think we need to spread it more broadly through coalitions, through continuum of cares, through school districts, that kind of a situation. And Northwest Furniture Bank has flyers and systems that we can email that as part of just communication. But most of our providers are already in the system.
I appreciate that they're in the system as referrals, but I think those were providers who had pieces of how it operates, what it costs. So it's a matter of changes. How are, anyway.
I can tell you for a fact that my case managers, they know all the details. I don't. Yeah.
Which means the right people have the information.
Yeah, the right people get the information.
Fair enough.
Well, it might be worth for us to bring in the Northwest Furniture Bank in the future to do a presentation on what they do and all that stuff. So that's good. It's good to have this discussion and we all kind of shared our pieces of the pie, and now we'll go to the source and have them do a presentation in the near future.
That'd be great.
Well, we've hit the 11 o'clock. I can't believe we kept 32 people chatting through that. That was awesome. Some of us are staying on to talk about like how we can fumble through this again next week. But for the rest of you, if you guys want to join and say that you want to participate in helping us coordinate all the things that we're doing, you're welcome to stay. I think we're going to take a few minute break before we start that conversation. So my screen's going to go dark so I can run to the bathroom. But for everyone else and those that are going to stay on, I'll see you soon. And it was a great Friday. Thank you guys so much for a good first post-Garrett meeting.
Yep. And I'll stay on here.
I thought it went really well.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fine. I like doing those breakout rooms. I do notice that typically a few people drop out, but we seem to retain most people in that.
I think maybe doing them early
Might be helpful, yeah.
is good.
That way you trap people into participating.
Yeah.
You have to stay for the
lose me in
breakout to get the
breakout
updates.
rooms.
Yep, you have to do the breakout rooms to get the updates.
There you go.
Hey,
That's
Maureen,
fine.
this is Sheila. I just had a crazy thought go through my head. You were talking about having some sort of a hub for these resources, right? And what went through my mind is Wikipedia. You know, if we had something in the coalition, kind of like a Wikipedia, where it could be updated by just certain individuals, but that, you know, you'd have a source for that. I know we have the resources and everything right now, but, you know, do people actually go there? You know, just a thinking out loud moment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, information, you know, sharing is so incredibly complicated right now.
It is. None of the systems that we're used to, especially anything in person, still exist. And what I have noticed, I'm sure others have, just there's an information overload, if anything. So, I mean, just our planning for today's meeting, I probably have 50 emails in my inbox. And I'll tell you, juggling through all that, it's like, okay, what search term am I going to use to find the right thing this time? I actually don't, I think it might be a good idea to do a Google Doc with a planning group so that we can just kind of have things there to play off of rather than weeding through emails.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, or just a Google group so that you can enter, so it's all in that same database, so that you can go and visit it so it doesn't get lost in your inbox.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm usually pretty good at juggling hundreds of emails, but putting together the agenda, and I'll tell you, I had to bother Garrett quite a few times yesterday because unfortunately I am not able to accept the coalition Zoom link that we sent out to everybody, because I did initially, and what it did is nuked my MDC link.
I actually read the
reestablish. So
I read the directions, and when it said your own account is going away, which I didn't even know I had, and I'm not sure I do, but anyway.
Yeah.
So how did you, so you are on the coalition account now?
So what I did is, I have access to the info at PC Homeless whatever account now. He gave me that yesterday. And he actually set up the Zoom link for the meeting. And it sounds like he's willing to continue doing some of that. The biggest benefit of doing that, I could have just sent out a link under my MDC account where I have even more power. But the issue is this account is all set up with the notes and all those kinds of things.
That's a dog. Sorry.